morning. My name is Karine and I'm going to teach you today a few basic concepts about communication. So before you learn all the different topics in that course, we might need to discover the basic concepts of communication. One of them is the communication process. Stay with me, it's not too hard, but it's interesting to understand it so you can see where problems happen in communication. So when you communicate with somebody, you need to be two, right? Communication is an exchange. So let's say that we have a sender, the person sending the message, and a receiver, the person who receives the message. So two people. What's happening when we communicate? The senders send a message. Now, before we send the message, we usually think about the word we use, about the voice that we're going to use, the body language that we're going to use, and maybe also the medium. Medium is, am I going to write? Am I going to speak? Am I going to do a video? So there's different mediums that you can use to send your message. That process of creating your message is what we call encoding. Like coding, you're creating very specific message with your own idea, right? So the sender encodes a message and then we choose the medium to send that message. And then it's gone. So you've chosen to speak politely because you're talking to your boss and you're using very specific words and you decided to say it, not write it on an email. You send the message. The receiver on the other side receives the message. However, will decode the message. Decoding is how they understand the message, how they interpret the message. And that's where many drama can happen. Now let's imagine I tell my boss, "Dear sir, sorry to disturb you. I have a question about the client." So you're using very polite words, your body language is very humble and nice and respectful. You encoded the message. Then the receiver, your boss, receives the message, but they might understand something else. They might understand that, why are you disturbing me? Oh, grooming is not good. Oh, you don't know what to do. They're going to take your message maybe negatively. That can happen. Or maybe they're in a good mood and they're going to take your message in a very nice way. So this is decoding, how they understand. So we'll see later how there is many situations where encoding and decoding do not work very well. There is a lot of factors changing that. So you send a message, that message was encoded, you choose a medium, and then the receiver decodes it, try to understand it. Once the person receives the message, they will usually send you a feedback. That's why it's a cycle communication. You should always have a response. Now the response can be body language, can be voice, it can be many things, but there is always a feedback in a conversation. So remember, sender encodes the message, choose a medium, the receiver decodes the message and then give a feedback. That's the communication process. Now let's see what's happening in the middle of that. Many issues can happen and those issues are called barriers, like a barrier, a wall. We call them barriers of communication. Anything that could stop the message from being understood. And we saw earlier that sometimes your mood, how you feel on that day, can be a barrier. When you're in a good mood, you're very happy, you welcome everybody, you're very positive. When you're in a bad mood, you usually have a very negative attitude, and every message received can be translated, decoded the wrong way. So your mood. Another things that can stop people from communicating properly is the knowledge. For example, you might be very junior in English. I speak to you in English, but you do not understand all the words. So you cannot really decode, right? Decoding requires some knowledge. Sometimes we just don't have it. Another barrier that could happen is the meaning of the words. So you do understand the words, but we have different meaning for those words. For example, emotion have very different meanings depending on the person. Some people might think that friendship is one thing, it's very intense, it's true friendship. And for other people, friend is just somebody you know. So same word, different meaning. Yeah? You might have cultural differences also. If you take the example of Myanmar, in Myanmar we have the restaurant a cheeseburger. Well, for many years, when you order a cheeseburger in Myanmar, you will get a cheeseburger, which is just bread with cheese. But in the rest of the world, a cheeseburger is bread, cheese, and meat. So, same word, different recipe. It's the same thing here. It can be a barrier. We don't have the same understanding of the words. So you can see there's a lot of barriers. Another one that can happen is a physical barrier. Noise. You're trying to give a lesson and somebody is screaming next to you. You're trying to give a phone call and the line shut down. Those are called physical barriers. They stop you from having a conversation with somebody. Now you can see already that the communication process, to work very well, you need to encode properly. The receiver needs to decode properly too. So try to avoid barriers as much as you can. If you have a meeting with a client, avoid very noisy environment. Make sure that they understand all the words you're saying. Maybe you're not going to use abbreviations or technical words that they might not understand. So those barriers of communication are very common in workplaces. They will bring you into a lot of troubles. So be aware of them. Try to avoid them as much as you can. Another thing that you should consider in communication is very often we think communication is about speaking. That's true. We speak when we send a message. And we're going to learn later in a lesson about how to speak properly, voice quality, and maybe how to make a presentation with gesture, body language. So speaking is important, true. However, one thing that is important too is listening. And I would say if you're a salesperson, listening is key. So when we send a message, maybe we're speaking, but the person on the other side is supposed to listen. And there are also some issues. Listening and hearing are two different things. Hearing is a physical process. Unless you are deaf, you will hear. We actually hear all the time. Even when you're sleeping, your brain still processes the sounds coming to you. So hearing is very passive. It happens all the time. But listening is very different. Listening is decision. You decide to listen. You decide to pay attention. You decide to concentrate on the message. So listening is active. So remember, if you go to a meeting, if you meet with clients, if you're on the phone with somebody, you need to decide to pay attention and avoid distractions. Listening has a very specific process. The first thing people do when they listen is that they decode your message. Remember decoding? They translate your message. They're trying to understand the meaning of your message. So we decode. And then from that decoding, we remember. Remembering is part of the listening process. Why do we need to remember? Because we're going to use those information later when we respond, for example. So when you listen, you decode and you remember. One way to remember is to take notes. Yeah. I usually have a very bad memory, so I always take notes in meetings. That's my way of remembering properly. Once you've remembered the information, you can analyze the information. Do you think it's true? Did I understand correctly? Does it make sense? Maybe there you might shape your belief, what you think is right or wrong, or you might prepare questions. this is not clear, I need to ask. So a listener will listen carefully, decide to listen, decode, remember, analyze, and then they respond, the feedback. Now that process can be very, very quick. You know that. In a split of a second, we actually listen, understand, try to remember information, and we ask questions and respond very quickly. Yeah? So it doesn't need to be a long process. It's actually sometimes quite natural. The key elements here is to decide to listen and to concentrate. Fight distractions. Fight the barriers of communication. In a boring meeting or boring lessons, we might be tempted to start thinking about something else. What am I going to eat tonight? The sky is so blue. What did she say? And then you're lost. So, a great listener, pay attention and concentrate. Might be hard sometimes, I agree, but it's important. Another thing you should do is to send signals to the person talking to you. You need to encourage the speaker. If a client is talking to you, usually we lean forward a little bit, we nod, we keep eye contact, we smile. Those ways are here, those body language signals are sending information to the person in front of you and they feel comfortable with you. So they keep on talking more, which in sales, you want that. So speaking is one thing, but listening is also quite important. And then finally, for this lesson today, let's discuss body language. Now, body language is a very important part of communication. Most people, they listen to what you say, but they usually look at you. And more than half of your message is body language. And in a business world, there is a lot of things you need to be careful. The way you sit down, the way you stand, your position, your gesture while you're talking, your facial expression. All of these elements are very important. The next section will show you the things that you should do and those that you should not do in body language. They are quite important. And try to apply them. Nobody is perfect, but try to see what you need to improve. Part of body language is also grooming. Now, as you know, grooming is your appearance, how you look. Grooming doesn't mean beautiful, it means clean. That means you look professional, you have the right haircut, you have the right outfit, your hands are clean. All of that are part of grooming. Now, each company has specific policies about grooming. Please follow them. You should follow the rules of your company because you're representing the company. So they might ask you to wear a specific makeup. Gentlemen, they might ask you to have a specific haircut. They might forbid you to have a beard. They might ask you to wear long skirts or shirts at work. Whatever they're asking you to do, you need to follow. Those are the rules of the company because you're representing the company in front of the clients. Now, outside work, you do what you want. So remember, when you meet a client, they're not only listening to you, they're watching you. What do they look at? Well, usually make sure that your grooming does not surprise people. You are not shocking. So avoid having too much makeup for the ladies or a lot of jewelry everywhere. That's usually not okay. For gentlemen, usually we're going to look at the grooming of your face, the haircut, your watch, and your shoes. So be careful that they actually are clean, in good shape, not too old. No need to have luxury items, but something in good shape, not too old, and clean. That's totally fine. We're going to look also at your fingers, because you're very close to the client, and when you're discussing with them, they will see your fingers. Make sure that your nails are not too long and that everything is very clean, that you clean underneath the nail, that you do not have any writing in your hands. Some people take notes inside their palm. You should avoid that for a meeting. You should take notes on the paper, not on your hands. Be careful to the clothes you're wearing. You don't need to have expensive clothes, but you should have clothes that are clean, well pressed, yes, and that they actually not shocking. So ladies, nothing too revealing. For gentlemen, have shirts with long sleeves, not transparent. Some shirts sometimes are very light. For the colors, we in Myanmar, so feel free to have bright colors if you want. I think it's totally acceptable in Myanmar. In Europe or in America, they tend to wear clothes that are black, brown, gray, white. So it's a bit sad. What is nice in Myanmar is that you have blue, green, yellow, a lot of different nice color, and they go very well on Myanmar faces. So do not be too worried about the color. However, avoid shiny. Anything too shiny, like the lingerie that you're wearing in a wedding, is not okay. All right? So grooming is very important. Some companies might ask you to wear Western clothes. Some companies might ask you to wear lingerie or Myanmar cultural outfit. That's okay. Either way, just follow whatever the company is asking you to do. So this lesson, we kind of like introduce the idea of communication process, the barriers of communication, what stops you from communicating, that you need to fight. The listening skills, speaking skills, we'll see them later. And finally, body language and grooming that are really important on a daily basis. So the next part will be about showing you tips on body language. And I hope you learn many things about what to do and not to do at work.